The ballroom fell silent the moment Duke Lucius Ashworth spoke the words that would follow him for months. Standing near the tall windows with a glass of wine in his hand, he told his friend Edward Colby that any man who married Eleanor Hale deserved pity, not congratulations. He said she was too sharp, too proud, and far too difficult for any sensible gentleman to endure. He did not know she was standing only a few steps away, close enough to hear every word. Eleanor turned slowly, her chin lifted, her eyes steady. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how she would react. She walked toward him with calm, unhurried steps, and when she reached him, she smiled, though there was no warmth in it. She told him that God should indeed help the man who married her, because that man would need patience to survive marrying someone far too clever for a duke who judged women before he ever spoke to them. The crowd around them gasped, then laughed nervously, unsure whether they had just witnessed an insult or a triumph. Lucius felt his face grow warm, not from embarrassment alone, but from something sharper, something unfamiliar. He was used to admiration, not defiance. Women in his circle often lowered their eyes when he entered a room. Eleanor did the opposite. She held his gaze until he looked away first, and that single moment unsettled him more than any argument could have. Eleanor Hale had not always been so guarded. 2 years earlier, she had trusted a man named Charles Whitmore completely, believing he loved her for who she was. Instead, he had used her affection to secure her family's connections, then abandoned her the moment a wealthier prospect appeared. The humiliation had followed her through every social season since, whispered about behind fans and closed doors. She had learned to protect herself with wit instead of trust, and she was not about to let a duke's careless words wound her again. As the evening continued, neither of them could stop glancing toward the other, though both pretended otherwise. Lucius found himself watching the way she spoke to others, effortless and unbothered by the attention his comment had brought her. Eleanor noticed the way he stood apart from the crowd, polite but distant, as though something heavier weighed on him beneath his composed manner. Before the night ended, their paths crossed once more near the garden doors. Neither spoke of the earlier exchange, yet the tension between them lingered, thick and unresolved. Lucius offered a brief, stiff apology, though his tone carried more curiosity than regret. Eleanor accepted it with a nod, but her eyes told him she had not forgotten, and she never would. Neither of them realized that night that fate had already begun weaving their lives together, pulling two guarded hearts toward a future neither one had ever expected to share. Weeks passed before circumstances forced them into each other's company again. Eleanor's family estate bordered land recently inherited by the Ashworth family, and a dispute over a shared boundary required both households to meet and settle the matter properly. Eleanor's father, eager to avoid conflict with a powerful duke, insisted she accompany him to the meeting, despite her reluctance to face Lucius again so soon. When they arrived at Thornfield Hall, Eleanor was surprised by its quiet elegance, so different from the cold reputation attached to its owner. Lucius greeted them formally, his manner controlled, though his eyes flickered toward Eleanor more than once during the conversation. The meeting itself proved tense, filled with careful words and guarded proposals, but beneath the formality, something else was stirring, unspoken and undeniable. During a brief pause in discussions, Eleanor wandered into the hall's private library while the men continued debating property lines. She had not expected to find Lucius there moments later, standing quietly near a portrait of a woman she assumed was his mother. His expression, usually composed, had softened into something vulnerable, something he clearly had not intended for anyone to witness. He explained, almost reluctantly, that his mother had died when he was young, and that the estate had shaped him into someone who valued control above all else, fearing loss the way other men feared failure. Eleanor listened without judgment, surprised by his honesty. For the first time, she saw not a proud duke, but a man carrying quiet burdens few ever noticed. In return, Eleanor found herself speaking of her own past, though she revealed only enough to explain her guarded nature, not the full pain behind it. Lucius listened carefully, and instead of offering empty comfort, he simply acknowledged her strength in rebuilding herself after betrayal. His respect, genuine and unforced, caught her off guard more than any compliment could have. Their conversation shifted the tone between them entirely. The sharp remarks that once defined their exchanges gave way to something gentler, though neither was ready to name it. When the property dispute concluded that afternoon, both families departed on cordial terms, yet Alina and Lucius exchanged a glance that lingered far longer than politeness required. In the days that followed, small excuses brought them into contact again. A borrowed book returned in person, a charity event both families attended, a carriage ride shared during an unexpected storm. Each meeting chipped away at the walls they had built, revealing glimpses of humor, intelligence, and warmth neither had expected to find in the other. Society began to notice the change as well. Whispers shifted from mockery to curiosity, wondering how the Duke who once dismissed Alina so harshly now sought her company at every opportunity. Alina tried to convince herself it meant nothing, that old wounds made her cautious for good reason. Yet each time Lucius entered a room, her guarded heart betrayed her with a flicker of anticipation she could not fully suppress. Neither spoke openly of what was growing between them, but both sensed it deepening with every quiet conversation, every shared silence, every moment that lingered a little too long before either dared to look away. The trouble began quietly, the way most dangerous rumors do. A jealous acquaintance named Margaret Locksley, who had long hoped to secure Lucius for herself, began spreading whispers that Alina had once been involved in a scandal serious enough to ruin her completely. The story, twisted and exaggerated from her broken engagement years earlier, spread quickly through drawing rooms and dinner parties, growing more damaging with every retelling. Alina found herself shut out of invitations she once received without question. Families who had respected her now offered cool greetings or none at all. Her father, worried for their reputation, urged her to remain quiet and let the scandal fade naturally. But Alina understood how quickly reputations could collapse under enough pressure, especially for a woman without powerful protection. When Lucius learned of the rumors, he did not hesitate. Despite advisors warning him that defending Alina publicly could damage his own standing, he attended the very next society gathering with clear intention. Standing before the same circle that had once heard his careless remark about her, he corrected the record firmly, stating that Alina Hale's character was beyond reproach, and that anyone spreading falsehoods about her would answer directly to him. The room fell silent, stunned by the Duke's unexpected declaration. Margaret, humiliated and exposed, quickly retreated from the conversation, her influence over the gathering broken in an instant. Alina, who had not been present for the exchange, learned of it later through her father, who described the moment with quiet astonishment. When Alina confronted Lucius privately about his actions, she struggled to understand why he would risk his reputation for her sake. He answered simply, admitting that the words he once spoke about her had been wrong, careless, and unworthy of the woman he had come to know. He said he could not stand by while others repeated a lie built on ignorance, especially when he understood better than anyone how untrue it was. Alina's pride wavered under the weight of his honesty. She had spent years protecting herself from vulnerability, yet here was a man willing to defend her publicly, without expecting anything in return. Still, old fears lingered, whispering that trust had betrayed her before and could easily do so again. Despite her hesitation, something had shifted permanently between them. Lucius had proven, through action rather than words, that his earlier judgment no longer reflected who he had become. Alina found herself softening toward him in ways she had not allowed herself to feel in years, even as caution held her back from admitting it fully. Their bond, tested by scandal and strengthened by loyalty, had grown into something neither could easily deny any longer, though both understood that greater challenges still lay ahead before their story could reach its true resolution. As winter approached, Lucius and Alina grew closer through quiet evenings spent discussing books, family, and dreams neither had shared with anyone before. Their connection deepened naturally, built on honesty rather than performance, yet Alina still hesitated to fully trust the growing warmth in her heart. Complications arose when Lucius's extended family pressured him to consider a more socially advantageous match, reminding him of his duty to secure the family standing through a strategic marriage. His aunt, Lady Winifred, argued that Alina's past scandal, though now quieted, still made her an unsuitable choice for a duke's wife, regardless of her personal qualities. Lucius found himself torn between family expectation and genuine affection, though his growing feelings for Alina made the decision far less complicated than his relatives assumed. Still, the pressure weighed on him, and he grew quieter during their meetings, distracted by obligations he had not yet resolved. Alina, sensing his distance, feared the worst. Convinced that he was preparing to choose duty over feeling, she withdrew from him first, determined to protect herself from another heartbreak before it could fully form. She declined invitations to Thornfield Hall and kept her replies to his letters brief and formal, rebuilding walls she had only recently allowed to soften. Lucius, confused by her sudden coldness, eventually sought her out directly, refusing to accept silence as an answer. During a private conversation in her family's garden, Alina finally admitted her fear that he would eventually abandon their connection under family pressure, just as Charles Whitmore had abandoned her years before. Lucius listened patiently, then spoke with clarity he had rarely shown before. He explained that his hesitation had never been about doubting her worth, but about finding the right moment to stand fully against his family's expectations. He admitted that the words he once spoke about her at that first ball had haunted him ever since, not because they were cruel, but because they had been so completely wrong. He told her that he no longer cared what society expected of a duke's marriage, only what would make his life genuinely meaningful. Alina, moved by his honesty, allowed herself to believe, cautiously at first, that this connection might finally be different from every disappointment she had known before. Their reconciliation was quiet but powerful, built on understanding rather than grand promises. Both recognized that trust needed to be earned gradually, yet both were willing to try, choosing vulnerability over the safety of guarded hearts. As winter gave way to the first signs of spring, their bond had grown strong enough to withstand whatever challenges society might still place before them. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth, and with it came the moment Alina never truly believed would happen. Lucius requested a private audience with her father, a gesture that immediately signaled his intentions to the entire household. Alina waited anxiously in the drawing room, her heart caught between hope and lingering disbelief. When Lucius finally entered, he did not offer rehearsed words or empty formality. Instead, he knelt before her, holding a simple ring that had belonged to his mother, the very woman whose portrait had first revealed his hidden vulnerability months earlier. He told Alina that she had changed everything he once believed about love, duty, and strength, teaching him that true partnership required honesty rather than control. He reminded her gently of the words he had spoken so carelessly at that first ball, admitting they had been the beginning of the greatest mistake and greatest fortune of his life. He asked her to marry him, not out of obligation or scandal correction, but because he could no longer imagine his future without her steady presence beside him. Alina, overwhelmed by emotion she had guarded for years, allowed herself finally to accept happiness without fear. She said yes, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes, and Lucius slipped the ring onto her finger with careful, reverent hands. News of their engagement spread quickly, and this time, the whispers carried admiration rather than judgment. Even Lady Winifred, once skeptical of the match, admitted that Alina's strength and honesty had proven far more valuable than any strategic alliance could have offered. Margaret Locksley, humbled by her earlier attempt to damage Eleanor's reputation, quietly withdrew from society gossip altogether. Their wedding took place in early spring, held in the gardens of Thornfield Hall beneath blossoming trees that Lucius had personally chosen to honor his mother's memory. Eleanor wore a simple gown, elegant without excess, while Lucius stood waiting with a calm certainty that surprised even those who knew him best. As they exchanged their vows, the very society that once mocked Eleanor's independence now watched with quiet respect, recognizing the strength it had taken for both of them to overcome pride, fear, and misunderstanding. The words Lucius once spoke so carelessly had become, in the end, the unlikely beginning of a love neither of them had expected, but both had come to cherish completely. By the time the last blossoms of spring settled over Thornfield Hall, Eleanor Hale had become Duchess Ashworth, her ring a quiet symbol of a promise built not on scandal or duty, but on genuine understanding between two hearts finally brave enough to trust again.